May 9, 1941, North Atlantic. A cold sea heaves under gray skies as convoy OB-318 threes toward safety. Lookouts strain their eyes against the waves, knowing that somewhere below, German U-boats wait like wolves in deep water. The destroyer HMS Bulldog churns ahead, engines roaring. Moments earlier, sonar caught the shadow of a submarine rising too fast, damaged, desperate, trying to surface. Then it appears. U-110 breaks through the waves, listing smoke rising from its conning tower. German sailors spill out in panic, diving into the freezing ocean as depth charges echo in the distance. A single order cuts through the spray. Board her! British sailors leap into a small launch, racing toward the abandoned submarine. They have no idea what waits inside. As they push open the hatch, the air is thick with diesel and silence. And on a small table lies a stack of Enigma logs, untouched. The realization hits instantly. If these are real, they can read Hitler's plans. In the early years of World War II, Germany believed it possessed an unbreakable advantage, a machine that turned its military communications into unreadable code. The Enigma, compact, portable, and protected by layers of rotating cipher wheels, it transformed simple messages into seemingly random letters. Each day, sometimes each shift, the Germans changed the internal settings, new rotor positions, new plugboard combinations, new encrypted worlds to hide in. For the Allies, it was like trying to solve a puzzle that reinvented itself every morning. By 1940, the consequences were deadly. German U-boats prowled the sea lanes like ghosts. Convoys carrying food, oil, weapons, and soldiers, the very lifeline of Britain, were being hunted in the mid-Atlantic where aircraft could not yet protect them. Every time the Admiralty plotted new routes, the Wolfpacks still found them. They always seemed to know where to strike. Behind this catastrophe lay encrypted orders, transmitted through Enigma machines aboard every U-boat. Britain's survival depended on reading those messages. Yet even before the war began, pieces of the key had emerged far from London. In Warsaw, in 1932, three brilliant mathematicians from the Polish Cipher Bureau, Marian Rejewski, Jerzy Ruzicki, and Heinrich Zygalski, had broken early versions of Enigma using algebra and tireless analysis. They built the first decoding devices. They understood the beast. But by 1939, the German system evolved faster than they could follow. As invasion loomed, Poland shared everything they knew with Britain and France: blueprints, component replicas, mathematical insights. A final act before their own defeat. In a mansion north of London, a secret organization formed around those ideas. Bletchley Park. Mathematicians, linguists, chess champions, and engineers gathered to wage a hidden war. Among them, Alan Turing, whose innovations would convert theory into machinery capable of racing against Enigma's daily shifts. Still, for all their intellect, British codebreakers faced a brutal truth. Without the actual updated German key sheets and logbooks, the machine remained a locked door with thousands of trillions of combinations. Every time Enigma settings changed, they were thrown back into the dark. In the Atlantic, ships continued to sink. In London, Churchill received daily reports of rising losses. He would later write that the U-boat peril was the only thing that truly frightened him. The Royal Navy needed more than mathematics. They needed luck. They needed courage. They needed to seize the enemy's secrets with their own hands before they disappeared beneath the waves forever. And soon, an opportunity would appear in the cold waters of the North Atlantic aboard a crippled German submarine rising toward the surface. By early 1941,
The Battle of the Atlantic had become a race Britain was losing. German Admiral Karl Donitz commanded a rapidly expanding U-boat fleet, deploying a strategy he called Rudel tactic, the Wolfpack tactic. When a solitary submarine spotted a convoy, it shadowed the ships and radioed for others to converge. Under the darkness of night, U-boats attacked from multiple directions at once. Convoys scattered, sailors drowned, and precious cargo sank to the ocean floor. Every encrypted signal that coordinated these attacks passed through the Luftwaffe and Kriegsmarine Enigma networks. Naval Enigma was even more complex than the Army and Air Force versions, equipped with additional features and security procedures. To the Germans, it was perfection, fast, portable, and, so they believed, mathematically impossible to break. In Britain, intelligence officers studied smoldering wreckage, searching for patterns. Admiralty tracking centers plotted new routes daily. Escort vessels sacrificed themselves to protect the convoys. Yet U-boats kept appearing where they were least expected. Britain's lifeline was being strangled. In February 1941 alone, nearly 500,000 tons of merchant shipping were lost. Each ship sunk meant less weapons for soldiers, fewer supplies for civilians, and fewer chances for Britain to continue the war. Some analysts predicted total collapse within months if the trend continued. Churchill refused to accept that fate. The solution, he believed, was intelligence. At Bletchley Park, Turing and fellow cryptanalysts worked tirelessly to build electromechanical bomb machines, devices capable of testing Enigma settings at unprecedented speed. Their aim: reveal daily keys before sunrise, so intercepted messages could be used while still relevant. But the gaps remain too large. There are too many. The ocean is too wide. Real progress required something the Germans would never willingly provide: untouched codebooks, current rotor wiring details, and operational logs from active U-boats. That could only be obtained through direct capture. And so the Admiralty issued new orders to escort commanders. If a U-boat surfaced and crews began to abandon ship, board the submarine at all costs. Retrieve every scrap of paper, every cipher key, every operational diary. It was a mission more dangerous than combat. Boarding a sinking U-boat meant risking entrapment in a steel coffin as it slipped beneath the waves. Explosions, booby traps, and flooded compartments awaited anyone who entered. Still, British sailors volunteered, because a single document, a single machine, could change the war. In early April 1941, the North Atlantic grew thick with U-boat patrols. German commanders felt confident, convinced that their codes remained impenetrable. Their encrypted radios crackled with orders that would soon guide them straight into an ambush. But they didn't know it yet. A crippled submarine was rising through rough water, seconds away from the greatest intelligence breakthrough of the war. When U-110 surfaced into British gun sights, it was not just another naval victory. It represented the convergence of multiple worlds, each one vital, each one unseen by the others. At Bletchley Park, the war was fought in silence. Inside wooden huts, rows of codebreakers poured over endless streams of intercepted signals, thousands of encrypted groups of 5 letters each, arriving every night from listening stations along Britain's coasts. The pressure was relentless. Every unsolved message could mean a ship lost at sea. Every delay could cost hundreds of lives. Alan Turing, quiet and intensely focused, designed configurations for the bombs that could slice through combinations once thought infinite. Beside him, Gordon Welchman developed organizational systems to handle the flood of intelligence once the codes began to yield. They slept little, worked constantly, and often received reports of convoy disasters they were powerless to prevent. To them, the war was numbers, cold, ruthless. a logic puzzle in which failure meant death on a massive scale. Yet for all their brilliance, one missing element still haunted their calculations. Current intelligence materials, latest settings, rotor orders, plugboard arrangements. The difference between a signal decoded in time and one deciphered only to count the dead. At sea, the war was fought with fear and steel. Royal Navy escort crews lived on constant alert. U-boats could strike from any direction, delivering a single torpedo that shattered hulls like glass and dragged men into the depths. Sailors learned to sleep in snatches, eat quickly, and never turn their backs to the water. To be ordered to board a damaged U-boat meant leaping into an unknown hell. Flooded compartments, live explosives, fuel fumes, and electrical hazards lurked inside. The enemy might have set charges before abandoning ship. The submarine might plunge again without warning, sealing anyone inside in pitch-black, drowning silence. Still they went, because they understood something profound. The mines at Bletchley Park needed tools, and the only people who could provide them were men willing to risk drowning inside enemy steel. In the German ranks, the war was fought with overconfidence. Kriegsmarine commanders held absolute trust in Enigma. It was the backbone of U-boat tactics. Every patrol route, every interception order, every Wolfpack strike began with a coded message transmitted across the Atlantic. German radio discipline was strict but confident. Even if the British intercepted signals, they were considered harmless without the P. Many U-boat captains even kept operational logs neatly written, intended for review upon return to base. After all, why worry? Enigma was a fortress of mathematics. The Allies would never understand the language of the wolves. This belief, that secrecy was guaranteed, encouraged boldness and sometimes negligence. It also meant that when codebooks and logs were left behind aboard U-110, the Germans did not believe disaster was possible. In London, the war was fought with dread. Churchill called the U-boat threat the greatest danger to Britain's survival. Every briefing on shipping losses weighed heavily on him. He watched the numbers rise and understood what they meant. If the Atlantic closed, Britain died. He needed a miracle, or something like it. These four perspectives were all connected, though the people within them rarely saw one another. The mathematicians never met the boarding parties who risked their lives to get the papers they needed. The sailors never shook hands with the prime minister whose hopes they carried. The Germans never imagined that their trust in Enigma would someday betray them. And now, in the cold waves off Iceland, those worlds were about to collide inside one damaged submarine.
The capture of Enigma logs did not merely rely on bravery, it demanded absolute secrecy. Intelligence, unlike artillery or aircraft, loses power the moment the enemy knows it exists. And in 1941, secrecy became the sharpest weapon the Allies possessed. The British government issued a strict directive. All ultra-intelligence must remain invisible. Even the word ultra, the code name for Enigma decrypts, was itself classified above top secret. Only a narrow circle of leaders, analysts, and naval commanders were informed of the truth that German communications were being read in near real time. The implications were chilling. Escort captains could not be told how the Admiralty knew a Wolfpack waited ahead. They might ask questions. They might talk. So orders to change course, to adjust speed, or to redirect convoys often arrived without explanation. Commanders were left to obey blindly, trusting a logic they could not see. Some resented this silence. Many suspected information was being withheld. But the alternative, exposing Ultra, was unthinkable. Operational discipline created moral burdens. If Ultra revealed that a convoy was being stalked, the Admiralty had to act cautiously. To suddenly divert every ship at once might tip off the Germans that their codes were broken. And so, on certain dark nights, British intelligence watched merchant vessels sail straight into danger, unable to intervene without risking the entire secret.
Men drowned because the truth was too valuable to reveal. Victory demanded sacrifice, not only from those at sea, but from those who knew and could not save them. Then there were the captures themselves. Boarding a U-boat was only the beginning. Officers recovering codebooks were instructed to remove all documents immediately, strip equipment that could identify what was taken, plant false stories to mislead German intelligence, and ensure the submarine sank afterwards, destroying every trace of the raid. To protect Ultra, Britain sometimes deliberately sank a captured submarine after emptying its secrets. It was a cold calculation. German command must believe the crew destroyed their materials before abandonment. If suspicions rose, U-boat procedures would tighten. Codebooks would be weighted and chained to wrists. Enigma machines would be smashed, logs burned instantly. Ultra would vanish back into the depths of silence. And the Germans? They kept faith in the machine. Captured sailors insisted that nothing had fallen into British hands. Reports from intelligence officers reassured Berlin the enemy might board a boat, but critical documents were always destroyed. Dönitz continued to trust his wolves. Enigma continued to broadcast orders, and U-boats continued to attack convoys that, slowly but surely, began maneuvering with uncanny foresight. A hidden war was unfolding. Mathematics and steel, survival and silence, all hinging on whether Ultra remained in the shadows. That shadow was about to deepen, because inside U-110 rested the most important haul yet retrieved from the Atlantic. What the British would find there would tilt the balance of the ocean war, but only if they kept the secret locked tighter than the Germans ever imagined.
May 9, 1941, mid-Atlantic, south of Iceland. The sea is restless, the wind cutting like a blade across the decks of convoy OB-318. British escorts push their worn engines to the limit, searching for predators beneath the waves. Earlier that morning, the German submarine U-110, commanded by Kapitänleutnant Fritz Julius Lemp, made its move. Lemp was experienced, credited with sinking the passenger liner Athenia on the first day of the war. His confidence in Enigma was absolute. His goal, break this convoy apart and slip away unseen. He fired. A merchant ship exploded into flames. Another slowed, taking on water. But this time, the wolves were the ones being hunted. HMS Abretia detected the submerged submarine on sonar. Depth charges rolled into the sea, explosions tearing apart the calm darkness below. Blasts shook U-110 violently, damaging systems and forcing Lemp to give the most dangerous order a U-boat commander could ever speak. Surface! The moment the conning tower emerged, British guns opened fire. Shells raked the casing. Panic spread among the Germans as steam hissed from ruptured pipes. Lemp ordered the crew to abandon ship and, crucially, he intended to return below and scuttle the submarine, destroying all classified materials. But chaos intervened. As water crashed across the tilted deck, Lemp lost control of the situation. German sailors threw themselves into the ocean. In the confusion, U-110 remained afloat, damaged but still breathing. Captain Joe Baker Cresswell aboard HMS Bulldog reacted instantly. Board her. A small team leapt into a launch under the command of Lieutenant David Baum. They approached cautiously. A submarine might still hold armed crew, collapsing compartments, or demolition charges primed to explode. Baum and his men climbed the wet hull and forced open the hatch. Darkness greeted them, not gunfire. Inside, they found a submarine frozen in the final seconds before self-destruction. Equipment still hummed faintly. Lamps flickered. Charts lay scattered on tables. German messages, plotted attack routes, and coordination plans for the North Atlantic Wolfpacks were all left behind. And then, the discovery that would electrify every Admiralty office and every hut at Bletchley Park, an intact naval Enigma machine and current codebooks and maps. Not soaked, not burned, not destroyed. Baum shouted for his men to take everything they could carry. ciphers, settings lists, signal logs, rotor instructions, the vital quartz signal heft, short signal book used for Wolfpack communications. In hurried trips, they dragged the treasure to the waiting launch. Every minute felt stolen from fate. The intelligence they recovered would allow British codebreakers to not only decipher past transmissions, but, for the first time, read German submarine orders as they were being issued. As the last load left the hatch, the sea claimed the submarine. U-110 slipped stern first beneath the waves, carrying with it any evidence the Germans might later search for. On the surface, the survivors of the U-boat floated in silence, unaware that a catastrophe far greater than sinking had just occurred. The British prepared a layered deception. Official reports stated that U-110 foundered before anything useful could be retrieved. Limp and many of his men were lost, likely not even aware in their final moments that Enigma had been captured intact. The Admiralty now held the key to the Wolves' language. The Atlantic was about to shift from the German hunting ground to the British killing zone.
The materials seized from U-110 arrived quietly in Britain under strict secrecy. They were transported directly to Bletchley Park, where codebreakers gathered around the prize like surgeons preparing for a critical operation. For Alan Turing and his team, this was the missing link. The captured key sheets, indicator tables, and Kurz-Signal heft short signal codes unlocked the final barrier that had long shielded the Kriegsmarine's operational network. Suddenly, Allied cryptanalysts could match intercepted radio traffic with accurate rotor settings for each day, before the Germans changed them again. The effect was immediate. Messages that had once been lines of meaningless characters began transforming into navigational plotted orders, into convoy interception plans, into detailed Wolfpack tactics. Intelligence reports no longer spoke in hypotheticals. Ultra-decrypts revealed where U-boats would be before they arrived. Convoys altered course subtly, slipping through deadly waters unseen. Destroyer groups appeared out of fog and storm to ambush stalking submarines. Wolfpacks found themselves firing torpedoes into the empty ocean. To preserve this priceless window, deception became a constant dance. British commanders were instructed, never act too quickly on ultra-intelligence. Allow some attacks to proceed to maintain German confidence. Spread successes across multiple units so no single ship looked suspicious. Attribute victories to air patrols, radar sighting, or lucky reconnaissance. The priority was simple. Ultra must survive, no matter the cost. If the Germans suspected a compromise, they would wipe the slate clean. New procedures, new machines, new signal discipline. The advantage would evaporate overnight. So even as shipping losses declined, British reports insisted that outcomes were due to improved escort tactics, not decoded communications. German naval analysts accepted these excuses. They believed Enigma remained inviolable. Dönitz, unaware of the truth, congratulated crews on tight security. He ordered his U-boats to increase radio transmissions. The Wolves spoke more freely, not less. The trap was tightening. From June to December 1941, ultra-intelligence directly contributed to the sinking or capture of multiple U-boats and the protection of countless merchant ships. Churchill, receiving ultra-summaries daily in a locked briefcase, understood what this meant. He later wrote, "Ultra was the secret weapon that won the war." But the breakthrough was fragile. Late in 1941, the Kriegsmarine introduced a new four-rotor Enigma designed specifically to protect the Atlantic U-boat fleet. Once again, the codes changed beyond reach. The messages fell silent to Allied ears. U-boats returned to lethal efficiency. Convoy losses began to climb. The war in the Atlantic plunged into its darkest hour. Yet the British now knew one thing with certainty. Enigma could be broken. German confidence was not invulnerable. A captured machine, retrieved by drenched sailors on a sinking submarine, had proven it, and the race to break the new system, to restore the flow of ultra-intelligence, would soon become as urgent as any battle fought with guns or torpedoes. But for the moment, the Allies had glimpsed the power of reading an enemy's thoughts in real time. They had seen the ocean shift from chaos toward control. They had realized the battle for the Atlantic could be won, all because a few brave men opened a hatch on a dying submarine and seized a codebook before the sea claimed it forever.
The capture of U-110's Enigma logs marked a turning point in the invisible struggle beneath the Atlantic waves. For the first time in the war, British commanders could anticipate where the enemy would strike. The perpetual terror of unseen submarines stalking convoys in the mid-ocean gap eased, not vanished, but shifted. Convoy survival rates began to improve. Escorts arrived in the right places at the right moments, launching depth charge attacks with uncanny precision. U-boats found their carefully planned intercepts betrayed by last-minute route changes. Instead of feasting on merchant ships, Wolfpacks often arrived to vacant seas. The pattern did not escape statistical analysis inside the Admiralty. Losses declined and intelligence summaries grew more confident. The ocean war was no longer a one-sided hunt, but the benefit was precariously thin. The Germans could change everything with a single discovery, that Enigma was compromised. So British decision-makers adopted a merciless equation: protect Ultra at any cost. If acting on decoded intelligence risked revealing the source, commanders were instructed to withhold action, even if it meant ships would be lost. The hidden morality of Ultra etched itself into the psyche of naval intelligence officers. They lived with the knowledge that they sometimes watched disaster unfold in silence. Lives were the price of victory, lives they could often name and count. Meanwhile, in Berlin, Dönitz remained convinced that his wolves were merely encountering better escorts and improved radar. His trust in Enigma was so deep that he expanded radio usage, unknowingly increasing the flow of decryptable material. But the advantage would not last. By the second half of 1941, the Kriegsmarine introduced the M4 four-rotor Enigma for Atlantic operations. This new system temporarily slammed the door shut again. The bombs fell behind. Messages turned to chaos once more. Allied officers began seeing old fears return, U-boats striking with renewed ferocity. The brief period of British foresight ended, replaced again by uncertainty. Yet what happened on U-110 had already rewritten the war's trajectory. It proved that the German cipher system was not a perfect shield. The British now pursued every chance to recreate that breakthrough. More captures, more daring boarding actions, and a tireless push for improved cryptanalytic machinery. Every naval engagement offered a new possibility. Every damaged U-boat is a potential goldmine. The battle for the Atlantic had evolved into a battle for information, and the British now understood just how powerful that information could be.
When the Germans deployed the four-rotor Enigma in late 1941, the Allies were thrust back into the dark. Wolfpacks surged across the shipping lanes like predators reborn. Convoy casualties increased sharply. Some in the Admiralty feared that the brief intelligence advantage had merely been an illusion, a flicker of light in an endless storm. But Bletchley Park refused to yield. Drawing on the lessons and confidence gained from U-110, British codebreakers intensified their assault on naval Enigma. More bombs were built. Engineering teams labored day and night. Listening stations captured every scrap of radio communication, hoping for errors or clues. The search for further captures continued with even greater urgency. That opportunity came repeatedly. U-559 in October 1942, where two British sailors drowned recovering codebooks. The German weather ship Lauenburg boarded in June 1941, yielding fresh cipher materials. Later U-boat seizures and intelligence coups that fed the machines in Hut 8. Each success restored a piece of the puzzle. Gradually, Ultra returned, stronger and faster than before. With renewed access to U-boat communications, Allied strategy sharpened dramatically. Radar improved,
Long-range patrol aircraft closed the mid-Atlantic gap. Escort groups formed hunter-killer teams equipped with new tools like HF-DF radio triangulation. Ultra-decrypts guided them like a silent compass. By mid-1943, the tide finally turned. Convoy battles such as those of ONS-5 and SC-130 demonstrated a decisive shift. Wolfpacks withdrew in defeat, suffering losses they could no longer replace. The hunters had become the hunted. Dönitz reacted with disbelief. His most trusted weapon, secrecy, had failed him. Even as he issued orders to tighten procedures, he never realized the truth. Most of his staff believed Allied victories were due to improved radar or aircraft coverage. Few suspected a breach in encryption. None could prove it. Ultra remained buried behind layers of deception. When war ended in 1945, the full extent of Enigma's compromise was known only to a handful of British and American officials. Most sailors who had boarded U-boats were never told how vital their actions had been. Bletchley Park veterans slipped quietly into civilian life, their war stories sealed by the Official Secrets Act. The world credited battleships, bombers, and soldiers with victory. Almost no one spoke of the codebreakers or of the captured logs that unlocked a continent's fate. Only decades later, as Ultra was finally declassified, did the full truth emerge. A small team of drenched sailors racing against a sinking submarine had given the Allies a window into the enemy's mind. The Battle of the Atlantic was won not through brute force alone, but through the silent conquest of coded words. And no German commander ever realized in his lifetime how deeply the Allies had been listening.
The story of U-110 and the captured Enigma logs reveals a truth often hidden beneath the thunder of war. Sometimes, the most decisive victories are won in silence. In the public imagination, World War II is a struggle of colossal armies and sweeping offensives, tanks roaring across continents, fleets exchanging shells beneath blackened skies. Yet in the mid-Atlantic, the battle that determined Britain's survival hinged not on firepower, but on information, mathematics, ingenuity, courage in the shadows. The brilliance of Bletchley Park alone could not have broken naval Enigma. The bravery of the Royal Navy alone could not have redirected the tides of war. But together, through a chain of minds and risks spanning from the depths of the ocean to the quiet rooms of a country estate, they pierced the heart of Germany's confidence. A single submarine, a single chance, a single moment where chaos failed to protect the codebooks that shaped an empire's strategy. History often turns on such fragile intersections. The men who recovered U-110's secrets did not know they were altering the course of the war. They only knew their task was dangerous and necessary. The codebreakers who interpreted those secrets rarely saw the convoys they saved, but their silent work preserved a nation's lifeline and helped ensure that democracy survived the darkest years of the 20th century. For decades, their victory remained hidden, but today the record is clear. Because the British captured those Enigma logs, they could read Hitler's plans, and in doing so, they helped win the war long before the guns fell silent.